Life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. After 20 years of marriage, I found myself divorced at 45, rattling around my Victorian house in Indianapolis. Like a ghost, the silence was deafening. You need a hobby. Nora, my friend Sarah, insisted over coffee one morning. Something to get you out of that museum you call home. She wasn't wrong. The house had become my fortress of solitude. Each room filled with memories I couldn't quite shake. My ex-husband's cologne still lingered. In the master bedroom, though, he'd been gone for months. That's how I found myself at the Morrison Gallery on a crisp autumn afternoon. The place smelled of fresh paint and possibility. My heels clicked against the hardwood floors as I wandered from piece to piece, searching for something to fill the void. First time here, the gallery owner Marcus appeared beside me. His bow tie was slightly crooked, and his eyes sparkled with genuine enthusiasm. Is it that obvious? I smoothed my blonde hair suddenly, self-conscious. You have that look of discovery. He gestured around the space. Art has a way of finding us when we need it most. I signed up for his painting class that day. Every Wednesday evening, I'd trade my realtor's blazer for a paint-splattered apron. The canvas became my confidant, and colors replaced the words I couldn't speak. Weeks turned into months. My technique improved, but more importantly, I started feeling like myself. Again, the other students became familiar faces, though. None truly connected with me until that rainy Thursday. I was standing before an abstract piece, swirls of blue and gold, that somehow captured the essence of maternal love. The artist had managed to convey such tenderness through simple brushstrokes that it made my chest ache. It feels like a warm embrace, doesn't it? A soft voice beside me said. I turned to find a woman with striking green eyes and dark brown hair that fell in gentle waves past her shoulders. She was younger than me, maybe early 30s, but there was an old soul quality about her exactly. I whispered, afraid to break the spell of the moment, like being held by someone who knows all your broken pieces. She nodded, and I noticed her eyes were glossy with unshed tears. I'm Audrey, she said, offering a slight smile. Nora. Our hands met briefly, and something shifted in the air between us. We stood there, in comfortable silence, both lost in the painting's depths. Later, I would learn that we were both seeing different things. I was remembering holding my children when they were small, while she was dreaming of a future she wasn't sure she'd ever have. Would you like to get coffee? The words tumbled out before I could stop them. There's a little cafe around the corner. Audrey's smile widened, reaching her eyes. This time I'd like that very much over lattes and lemon scones. We talked about art and life and loss. She was an artist herself, though she spoke of it with endearing modesty. As the cafe lights grew dimmer and the evening crowd thinned, I realized hours had passed like minutes. I should go, she said finally, gathering her bag, but this was nice. I hesitated, then pulled out one of my business cards. If you ever need a friend, or just someone to look at art with, she took the card, her fingers brushing mine. Thank you, Nora. Walking home that evening, the autumn air felt different. Somehow the streetlights seemed to glow a little brighter. And for the first time in months, the thought of my empty house didn't fill me with dread. Little did I know that this chance encounter would change everything, that the woman with the green eyes would not only become my tenant, but would redefine what home meant to me entirely. 2 weeks after our gallery meeting, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Audrey's voice came through slightly shaky, but determined she needed a place to stay, and remembered I was a realtor. I have to leave my apartment, she explained. Things are complicated. I thought of my empty rooms upstairs, gathering dust and memories, actually. I might have something perfect when she arrived to view the space. I noticed the fading bruise near her collarbone, poorly concealed by makeup. Her eyes darted around like a spooked deer. but she relaxed slightly when I showed her the sun-filled room that could double as an art studio. It's more than I can afford. She admitted, fingers trailing along the bay window's ledge. We can work something out. The words came naturally. Maybe you could help renovate. This old house could use an artist's touch. Her smile was worth the impulsive offer. We signed the rental agreement over tea in my kitchen, where she finally shared fragments of her story. Her ex-girlfriend had a temper, she explained, leaving the rest unspoken. You're safe here, I assured her, fighting the urge to reach across the table and squeeze her hand. Moving day brought rain, and Sarah's raised eyebrows. A tenant half your age, she whispered while helping carry boxes. Nora, are you sure about this? I ignored her concern, focusing instead on Audrey's face as she arranged her easel by the window. She looked younger, in the soft morning light, more vulnerable. The first week was a dance of awkward encounters in the hallway and mumbled good mornings over coffee. But gradually the house began to transform. Audrey's paintings appeared on walls that had been bare for months. The scent of oils and turpentine mixed with my cooking, creating an oddly comforting atmosphere. One evening I found her in the kitchen at midnight crying over a cup of cold tea without thinking. I sat beside her and waited. The clock ticked away 10 minutes before she spoke. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, she confessed, for someone to start screaming or throwing things. Or not. Here, I said firmly. Never here. She looked at me, then really looked at me, and I saw something shift in her expression. Trust, maybe. Or hope days blended into weeks. I discovered Audrey was an early riser who sang in the shower and had a habit of leaving half-finished cups of coffee everywhere. She learned I stress baked at midnight and could spend hours reading in the garden. The house came alive with her presence. She painted murals in the hallway, delicate vines that seemed to grow and change in different lights. My client started commenting on the artistic touch. When viewing other properties, you seem different. Marcus noted during our weekly art class. Happier. I was having Audrey around. Felt like opening windows in a room that had been sealed for years, fresh air and light pouring in, disturbing the dust, but making everything clearer. One Sunday morning, I found her attempting to fix a leaky faucet in the upstairs bathroom. She was cursing softly, her hair tied up in a messy bun. Water splashed across her shirt. Let me help, I offered. Taking the wrench, our hands brushed and neither of us pulled away immediately. I want to make things better here, she said quietly. To earn my place you already have, I replied, meaning more than just the rent. That evening we sat on the porch swing watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that reminded me of her latest canvas. She leaned her head against my shoulder, exhausted from a day of painting. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. I felt something stir in my chest. Protective, yes, but also something else. Something that made me both terrified and exhilarated. As the stars began to appear, I realized my empty house had become a home again, and it had nothing to do with the fresh paint on the walls. The truth came out on a stormy night in October. We were sharing a bottle of Miro in the living room, the rain drumming against the windows when Audrey suddenly sat down her glass. I need to tell you something, she said, her fingers twisting in her lap about why I'm really here in Indianapolis. I waited, watching the shadows from the fireplace dance across her face. She looked both younger and older in that moment, vulnerable yet determined. I'm going to be a Surratt, she said finally. For my best friend from college and her wife. They've been trying for years, and I wanted to help. The wine glass nearly slipped from my hand. You're pregnant. She shook her head. Not yet. The procedure is scheduled for next month. I should have told you sooner, but I was afraid you wouldn't want a pregnant tenant. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by guilt for feeling relieved. Of course you can stay. This is your home. Now her eyes met mine, glistening with unshed tears. Really. I reached across the space between us, taking her hand. Her skin was warm against mine, sending tiny sparks up my arm that night. Opened a floodgate of conversations. We talked until dawn, sharing pieces of ourselves we'd kept hidden. I told her about my marriage, how it had crumbled, not with a bang, but with years of quiet distance. I thought I was broken. I admitted, unable to feel that kind of connection anymore. Audrey's hand tightened around mine. "You're not broken, Nora. You're one of the most alive people I know." As weeks passed, our evening talks became a ritual. We'd curl up on opposite ends of the couch, sharing wine and secrets she told me about her art. How each piece was a story she couldn't tell with words. One night she showed me sketches of the nursery she was designing for her friend's baby. Her eyes lit up as she described the woodland creatures she planned to paint on the walls. "You really want to do this?" I asked softly. "Give them this gift, they deserve to be parents," she said. "And I want to help create something beautiful." The way she said it made my heart ache. There was such pure intention in her words, such selflessness without thinking. I reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face. Her breath caught, and for a moment time seemed to stop. Then the grandfather clock chimed. Midnight. Breaking the spell, we both pulled back, laughing nervously. Days grew shorter as November approached. I found myself watching Audrey more closely, noticing little things, the way she bit her lip when concentrating on a painting, how she always smelled faintly of lavender and paint. Thinner the curve of her neck when she threw her head back, laughing. One morning, I walked into the kitchen to find her dancing while making coffee. Her hair wilded from sleep. She grabbed my hands, pulling me into an impromptu waltz dance with me. "Nora," she laughed. "Life's too short for mourning." Grumpiness. We spun around, the kitchen island giggling like teenagers when we stopped. She was so close I could see the gold flecks in her green eyes. My hands were still on her waist, and hers had somehow found their way to my shoulders. The coffee maker beeped, startling us. Apart. But something had shifted, like a painting viewed from a new angle, revealing colors that were there all along. That evening, I sat alone in my room, staring at my reflection. My blonde hair was starting to show strands of silver laugh lines, crinkling at the corners of my blue eyes. I thought about Audrey, 13 years younger, and about to embark on an incredible journey. "What are you doing, Nora?" I whispered to myself. But I knew what was happening, even if I wasn't ready to name it. Every time our hands brushed, passing the salted dinner, every shared smile across the room, every late-night conversation, they were all brushstrokes, creating something I hadn't planned, for something that both thrilled and terrified me. The Morrison Gallery called on a Tuesday. They wanted to feature Audrey's work in their upcoming spring showcase. Her scream of joy echoed through the house, and before I knew it, she was in my arms, spinning us both around the kitchen. "They want 15 pieces by next month," she said breathlessly. "Nora, will you help me choose?" The next few weeks became a blur of canvas and color. Audrey transformed our shared living space into a makeshift gallery. Paintings leaning against every available surface I'd come home from showing. Houses to find her perched on a stepladder, hair tied up in a messy bun, completely lost in her work. "What do you think about this one?" she'd ask, gesturing to a swirl of blues and purples that somehow captured exactly how twilight feels perfect. I'd say, though, I was often looking at her, rather than the painting. The night of the opening arrived sooner than we expected. I helped her hang the last piece, an abstract exploration of maternal love that reminded me of the painting we'd first bonded over. "You should get ready," I told her, noticing paint smudges on her cheek. "Your big night starts in 2 hours. She bit her lip, suddenly nervous. "Will you help me choose what to wear in her room?" Dresses were scattered across the bed like fallen autumn leaves. She held up a green silk number that matched her eyes perfectly. "This one," I said softly. "It's beautiful," She disappeared into the bathroom to change, and I tried not to think about the flutter in my stomach when she emerged. The dress hugged her curves, perfectly making her look like a classical painting come to life. Zip me up. She turned, exposing her back. My fingers trembled slightly as I pulled the zipper upward, trying to ignore the warmth of her skin. The gallery was packed when we arrived. Marcus had outdone himself with the lighting, making each piece glow like a captured sunset. Audrey worked the room like a natural, charming potential buyer's with her genuine passion for art. I watched from across the room, nursing a glass of champagne, feeling oddly proud and something else I couldn't quite name. "She's quite talented," Sarah appeared beside me, "and quite beautiful, Sarah," I warned. "I see the way you look at her, Nora." Her voice was gentle. It's okay to feel things again before I could respond. The gallery string quartet started playing. People began pairing off to dance, and suddenly Audrey was in front of me. Hand extended dance with me. Her eyes sparkled with champagne and success. We swayed together closer than we should in public, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Her head rested against my shoulder, and I could smell her lavender shampoo. "Thank you for believing in me," she whispered. The music ended, but we stayed connected for a moment too long. Several people were watching us now, whispering behind their wine glasses. "I need some air," Audrey said suddenly, heading for the gallery's back door. I followed her into the alley, where spring rain had just begun to fall. She was looking up at the sky, letting droplets hit her face. "Are you okay?" I asked, moving closer. She turned to me. Makeup, slightly smudged, looking more beautiful than ever. I've never been better. Maybe it was the rain, or the champagne, or the way the streetlight caught the green in her eyes. But suddenly, we were moving toward each other like magnets. Finally released her lips, met mine softly, at first, then with increasing urgency. She tasted like champagne and possibility. My hands found her waist as her, tangled in my hair. The gallery door opened, startling us apart. A couple stumbled out, giggling, too wrapped up in each other to notice us. We stared at each other, both breathing heavily. Rain had plastered Audrey's dress to her skin, and my carefully styled hair was completely ruined. "We should go back inside," I said. Finally, though, everything in me wanted to kiss her again. She nodded, but caught my hand as I turned away. "Nora, this isn't just because of the champagne, I know," I whispered, squeezing her hand. We returned to the gallery separately, but something fundamental had shifted. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of stolen glances and brief touches that felt like electricity. Later in the taxi home, Audrey fell asleep on my shoulder. I watched the city lights play across her face and realized with both terror and joy that I was falling in love with my tenant. The morning after the gallery opening, I woke to the smell of coffee and panic. Last night's kiss play played on repeat in my mind as I stared at my ceiling, wondering how to face Audrey across the breakfast table. But when I finally ventured downstairs, she was already gone. A note sat beside a steaming mug. "Gone to the clinic, first appointment. Don't worry about last night, A. Don't worry about last night." 4 words that somehow made me worry more. I spent the morning showing houses to clients, barely registering their questions about square footage and property taxes. My mind kept drifting to the feeling of Audrey's lips against mine, the way she'd felt in my arms. "Mrs. Perry." My client's voice snapped me back, the master bathroom, right? I smiled apologetically this way. When I returned home that afternoon, Audrey was in her studio, music playing softly, as she worked on a new piece. Paint streaked her overalls, and her hair was tied up messily. "Hey," she said, not turning around. "Hey." I lingered in the doorway. "How was the appointment?" She sat down, her brush finally facing me. "Everything's on track. They'll do the procedure next week." The reality of her surrogacy hit me like a physical force in a few days. She might be carrying someone else's child. The complexity of our situation suddenly seemed overwhelming about last night. We both started simultaneously, then laughed nervously. "You go first," I offered Audrey, wiped her hands on her overalls, leaving smears of blue paint. "I don't regret it, the kiss. But I understand if you want to pretend it never happened. Is that what you want?" She met my eyes then, and the intensity of her gaze made my breath catch. "No." I crossed the room in 3 steps, cupping her face in my hands. This kiss was different from last night's slower, more deliberate. She tasted like coffee and possibility. When we finally pulled apart, there was pain on my blouse and in my hair. Neither of us cared. "We should talk about this," I said, still holding her close. I know she sighed. "It's complicated." Complicated was an understatement. She was my tenant. 13 years younger, about to become a surrogate. I was recently divorced, still figuring out who I was without a husband. We spent that evening on the porch swing trying to make sense of our feelings. The spring air was warm, carrying the scent of blooming magnolias. "I'm scared," Audrey admitted, "not just of this thing between us, but everything. Being a surrogate, starting over, falling for someone I never expected to fall for." I squeezed her hand, me too. The next few days were a dance of stolen kisses and serious conversations. We agreed to take things slow to keep our changing relationship private until we figured things out. But living together made slow challenging. Every shared meal felt charged with possibility. Every accidental touch-in the hallway sparked electricity. Even watching TV became an exercise in restraint, both of us hyper-aware of the shrinking space between us on the couch. The night before her procedure, I found her in the garden, staring at the stars. "Second thoughts?" I asked, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "No," she said firmly, "but I'm worried about us. What if the pregnancy changes everything? What if you decide you don't want to deal with all this?" I turned her to face me. "Audrey, I'm not going anywhere." She kissed me. Then, fierce and desperate, like she was trying to memorize the feeling. I held her close, breathing in her familiar lavender scent. "Whatever happens," I whispered, against her hair. "We'll figure it out together." Later that night, lying in my bed alone, I thought about how quickly life can change. 3 months ago, Audrey was just my tenant now. She was becoming something more precious and terrifying than I'd ever imagined. Sarah's words from the gallery echoed in my mind. It's okay to feel things again. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was time to stop fighting whatever this was between us, complicated as it might be. Because when Audrey smiled at me across a room, everything else, age, circumstances, fear, seemed to fade away. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But for now, I let myself feel the full weight of falling in love with her, scary and beautiful, as it was the day I met. Catherine was unseasonably warm for spring. Audrey had been jittery all morning, rearranging flowers and fluffing pillows until I caught her hands in mine. "Everything will be fine," I assured her, pressing a quick kiss to her forehead. "I just want them to like you," she admitted. "Catherine's been my best friend since college." The doorbell rang and Audrey practically jumped. Standing on our porch was a tall woman with auburn hair and kind eyes, holding a casserole dish. "Catherine," Audrey breathed, embracing her friend. "Where's Marie working?" Catherine smiled apologetically, but she sent her famous lasagna. I watched their easy familiarity with an unexpected twinge of jealousy. Catherine's hand lingered on Audrey's arm as they caught up, her eyes constantly drawn to Audrey's. Still flat stomach. "You must be Nora." She finally turned to me. "Audrey's told me so much about you, all good things." I hope I forced a smile, trying to ignore how Catherine's arm had slipped around Audrey's waist over lunch. Catherine shared stories. From their college days, the time they'd gotten locked out of their dorm in pajamas, their failed attempt at starting a band. Each tale highlighted their deep connection, making me feel like an outsider. Remember that awful blind date I set you up with? Catherine laughed. What was his name? David. Audrey grimaced. He talked about his pagana all night. Good thing you finally figured out you preferred women. Catherine winked. I nearly choked on my wen. Something in Catherine's tone suggested more than friendly teasing. After lunch, Audrey excused herself to take a work call, leaving Catherine and me alone in the kitchen. She seems happy here, Catherine said, watching me carefully. Happier than I've seen her in years. I hope she is just Catherine. Hesitated. Be careful with her. She's been through enough. I'm not the one asking her to carry a baby. I replied sharper than intended. Catherine's eyes narrowed. That was her choice. She wanted to help us start a family, and I support that. But don't. Pretend you're not asking something huge of her. The tension crackled between us until Audrey returned, oblivious to our silent standoff. Everything. Okay? She asked, looking between us. Perfect. Catherine smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I should get going at the door. She hugged Audrey tightly. Call me anytime. Day or night, I'm always here for you. After she left, Audrey turned to me. That wasn't so bad, right? I managed a non-committal noise, busying myself with dishes. Nora, she touched my arm. What's wrong? Nothing, I scrubbed a plate too hard. She clearly cares about you. Are you jealous? Audrey sounded incredulous of Catherine. Should I be? She turned me around, forcing me to meet her eyes. Catherine and I were never anything more than friends. Yes, she's protective, but that's because she was there after Rachel. Your ex. Audrey nodded. Catherine helped me leave. Her gave me a place to stay until I found you. The possessiveness in my chest eased slightly. I'm sorry. I just seeing you together. Hey, she cued my face. Catherine has Marie and I have you. She kissed me then, soft and sweet, until the last of my jealousy melted away that evening. We curled up on the porch swing, watching fireflies dance in the garden. Audrey's head rested on my shoulder, her breathing steady and calm. I need to tell you something, she said quietly. Catherine offered to let me move in with them during the pregnancy. My heart stopped. Oh. I told her no. Audrey sat up, meeting my eyes. My home is here. Now with you, relief flooded through me, followed by guilt for doubting her. Are you sure they're the baby's parents? And you're? She paused, blushing slightly. You're my future. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with promise. I pulled her closer, breathing in her familiar scent. I love you. I whispered the words, slipping out before I could stop them. She stilled in my arms, and for a moment I feared I'd said too much too soon. Then she turned, eyes shining with tears. And something else, I love you too. She breathed against my lips so much it scares me. Sometimes we stayed there until the stars came out, holding each other and making plans for a future neither of us had expected. Catherine's presence still lingered at the edges of my mind, but Audrey's warmth against me was real and present, and mine's summer arrived with a vengeance, bringing humid days and restless nights. Audrey's pregnancy was confirmed, and our lives settled into new rhythm. Each morning, I'd find her in the kitchen, fighting morning sickness with ginger tea and crackers. You don't have to hover, she'd say, but lean into my touch anyway. As I rubbed her back, the neighborhood had started to notice our changing relationship. Mrs. Henderson next door stopped, bringing her famous apple pies, and I caught whispers at the local coffee shop. But for every turned back, there was someone like Marcus from the gallery who simply smiled and said about time. One particularly sticky afternoon, I came home to find Audrey painting in just a tank top and shorts, her skin gleaming with sweat. The slight curve of her stomach was visible now. 3 months along the air conditioning's broken. She explained, not looking up from her canvas. I called the repairman, but they couldn't come until tomorrow. That night we dragged mattresses onto the screened porch, hoping to catch any breeze. This reminds me of camping. Audrey laughed, her hair spread across the pillow. Like spilled ink, you camp. I propped myself up on an elbow, watching her in the moonlight used to, before everything got complicated. I knew what she meant before the pregnancy. Before us. Before life took its unexpected turns. Thunder rumbled in the distance and the air grew heavier with approaching rain. Audrey shifted closer, her body warm against mine. "Tell me a secret," she whispered. "I'm scared," I admitted, "of how much I need you." She found my hand in the darkness. Me too. The storm broke suddenly, rain hammering against the porch screens. Lightning illuminated Audrey's face in brief flashes, making her look otherworldly. "Dance with me," she said, pulling me up in the rain. She was already leading me down the porch steps and into the garden. The warm rain soaked through our clothes immediately. Audrey's tank top clung to her curves, her hair plastered to her face. We swayed together. No music but the thunder. Her arms around my neck when she kissed me. She tasted like rain and summer and everything I'd been missing my whole life. The next morning, Sarah caught me buying cold medicine at the pharmacy, dancing in thunderstorms. She raised an eyebrow at my sniffles. "Must be love it is," I said simply, surprising us both with my candor. The summer days blurred together in a haze of doctors, appointments, and stolen moments. Audrey's morning sickness faded, replaced by odd cravings and mood swings. I'd find myself driving across town at midnight for specific brands of pickles or ice cream. Our relationship became the subject of local gossip. Some clients quietly found other realtors, others surprisingly sought me out. Specifically, my daughter's gay woman confided during a house showing. "It's nice to see someone living. Honestly, living. Honestly." The phrase stuck with me as I watched Audrey's body change, carrying another couple's dream while building our own. One night, I found her crying in front of her easel. "What's wrong?" I rushed to her side. "Nothing." She wiped her eyes. "Everything. Hormones. The baby kicked today." I hesitated, then placed my hand on her rounded belly. After a moment, I felt it a tiny flutter against my palm. "That's amazing." I breathed it. "Makes it real," she said softly. "That I'll have to give this baby away." I held her close, feeling her tears soak through my shirt. "You're doing something incredible for Catherine and Marie, for the baby." I know she pulled back slightly, but sometimes I imagine if it was our baby. The words hung between us, heavy with possibility. I kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. "Maybe someday," I whispered. "If you want." She nodded against my chest, and we stood there in her paint-scented studio, holding each other and dreaming of futures we'd never dared imagine before that night. As thunder rolled in again, we made love. Slowly, carefully, mindful of her changing body afterward. She fell asleep with her head on my chest, one hand protectively curved around her belly. I stayed awake, listening to the storm and thinking about family. The ones we're born into. The ones we choose. And the ones we create in ways we never expected did. Outside, lightning split the sky, illuminating our garden where we danced in the rain, where we'd first said "I love you," where we were growing something as unexpected and beautiful as the life inside her. The call came at 3:00 a.m. on a Tuesday. Audrey's voice was tight with pain as she shook me awake. "It's time," she whispered. "We'd rehearsed this moment. Packed the hospital bag weeks ago, but nothing prepared me for the reality." My hands shook as I helped her down the stairs, her face torting with each contraction. The night was oddly quiet as we drove to the hospital streetlights, casting intermittent shadows across Audrey's face. She gripped my hand during contractions, her knuckles white caul. "Catherine," she managed. Between breaths, Catherine and Marie arrived, just as they were settling Audrey into a delivery room. Catherine's eyes were wide with anticipation, while Marie hung back, looking uncertain. "Wake be in the waiting room," Catherine said, squeezing Audrey's hand. No, Audrey grabbed her wrist. "Both of you should stay. You're the parents." My heart clenched at those words, but I forced a smile. "I'll go. Don't you dare." Audrey's grip on my hand tightened. "I need you here." The next hours blurred together in a symphony of monitors, beeping, nurses checking, and Audrey's increasingly intense contractions. I wiped her forehead with cool cloths, whispered encouragement, and tried to ignore the way Catherine hovered on her other side. "You're doing great," I murmured as another contraction peaked. "Shut up," Audrey growled, then immediately apologized. Sorry, she meant it." Catherine laughed nervously. She once told me to jump off a bridge during a panic attack. The shared memory hung between them, and I felt that familiar twinge of outsider status. But then Audrey turned her face into my neck. "Tell me about the garden," she whispered. "What we'll plant next spring." So I described tulips and daffodils, herb gardens and rose bushes, anything to distract her from the pain. Catherine and Marie exchanged glances across the bed, but I focused only on Audrey. Dawn was breaking when the doctor announced it was time to push. Audrey's grip on my hand became crushing. "I can't," she panted. "Yes, you can." I kissed her temple. "You're the strongest person I know." The next 20 minutes were intense and primal. Audrey alternated between cursing and crying, her body working to bring this precious gift into the world. Then suddenly a cry pierced the room. A tiny, perfect baby girl, with a shock of dark hair, was placed briefly on Audrey's chest before being whisked away for checking. "She's beautiful." Catherine sobbed while Marie wrapped her arms around her wife. I watched Audrey's face as she stared after the baby, saw the complex mix of emotions there. Pride, joy, loss, all wearing for dominance. The next few hours passed in a blur of medical procedures and paperwork. Catherine and Marie took their daughter to the nursery, promising to bring her back for feeding soon when we were finally alone. Audrey broke down. I didn't expect it to hurt this much. She whispered the delivery, letting her go. I climbed onto the narrow hospital bed, careful of her IV lines, and held her as she cried. There were no words to make this easier, no way to soften the edges of this bittersweet moment later, when Catherine brought the baby back for feeding. I started to leave the room. "Stay," Audrey said softly. "Please." So I stayed watching as she helped this tiny person who shared her DNA, but wasn't hers to keep. The baby's small hand wrapped around Audrey's finger, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks that night. After Catherine and Marie took their daughter home after the nurses had done their final checks, Audrey turned to me in the dim hospital room. "Take me home," she whispered. The drive back was quiet, heavy with unspoken emotions. When we reached our house, I helped her inside, noting how she paused at the nursery door. We'd helped Catherine decorate in our bedroom. She stopped, looking lost. "I don't know how to feel," she admitted, proud. "Sad. Empty. You can feel all of it," I said, pulling her close. "Whatever you're feeling is okay." She kissed me, then desperate and needy, her hands pulling me closer. I responded carefully, mindful of her recovery. "I love you." She breathed against my lips. "Thank you for being there." We fell asleep, tangled together, her head on my chest, my arms protective around her outside. The first hints of dawn were painting the sky, promising a new day, a new chapter, a new beginning. The weeks following the birth were harder than either of us expected. Audrey's body was healing, but her heart seemed to be caught in a storm of emotions. I'd find her in the nursery. We'd help decorate, touching the woodland. Creatures she'd painted on the walls? Maybe we should turn this into a proper art studio, I suggested one morning, finding her there again. She nodded, but her eyes were distant. I keep thinking about her. Is that wrong, no love? It's natural. The physical. Recovery was straightforward. Follow the doctor's orders. Take the prescribed medications, rest. But the emotional aftermath was messier, less defined. Sarah, ever practical, suggested therapy. There are specialists who work with surrogates, she said over. Coffee? Both of you should go. I brought it up carefully that evening, expecting resistance. Instead, Audrey surprised me. I was thinking the same thing she admitted for both of us. Dr. Martinez's office became our weekly sanctuary she specialized in, non-traditional families and surrogacy. Support her walls covered in abstract art that reminded me of Audrey's work. Tell me about your fears, she said in our first session. Audrey spoke first. I'm afraid I made a mistake. Not the surrogacy. I don't regret helping Catherine and Marie, but starting a relationship in the middle of it all. My heart clenched, but Dr. Martinez nodded encouragingly. And you, Nora? I'm afraid I'm not enough. I confess that I'm too old, that this is too complicated, that she'll wake up one day and realize that's enough. Material for months. Dr. Martinez smiled, letting work through it together, slowly, session by session. We unpacked our fears. The age difference that sometimes felt like a canyon. The complexity of loving someone who'd carried a child for someone else. The whispers and judgments from our small community society doesn't have a script for this. Dr. Martinez explained, You're writing your own story between sessions we worked on, rebuilding our intimacy. Simple things, at first holding hands during movies, dancing in the kitchen, sharing morning coffee on the porch one evening. Audrey set up her easel in the garden. Will you model for me? She asked. I posed among the late summer flowers, feeling self-conscious until I saw her face the way she looked. At me like I was art worth capturing made me forget every insecurity. You're beautiful, she said, brush moving across canvas. I wish you could see yourself through my eyes. The painting, when finished, showed me bathed in golden light, looking younger and more vibrant than I'd felt in years. That's how you see me. That's who you are. She insisted, wrapping her arms around me from behind. We hung the painting in our bedroom, a reminder of how love can transform. Perspective. The therapy sessions continued, twice weekly. At first, then weekly. We learned to navigate our unique challenges, to communicate fears before they became walls. Age is just math, Audrey declared one night. What we have is chemistry. The line was so cheesy. We both burst out laughing, but the truth beneath it remained. We were building something real, something that defied conventional labels. Catherine and Marie invited us to dinner, 1 month after the birth. Audrey held the baby briefly, her eyes clear and peaceful. She's perfect, she said, handing her back to Marie, but she's yours later that night. Curled together in bed. Audrey traced patterned PS on my arm. I want to paint again, she said. Really paint, not just commissions. What's stopping you? I want to do a series about surrogacy, about love and loss and choosing your own path, but I'm scared it's too personal. I kissed her shoulder. The best art usually is. She started the next day, transforming our spare room into a proper studio. The paintings were raw and honest, a pregnant woman dancing in rain, empty nursery walls with fading girls, 2 women of different ages, holding each other in golden light. These are incredible, I breathed, looking at the finished collection there. Our story, she said simply, the complicated, beautiful mess of it. Dr. Martinez called it a breakthrough. We called it healing that fall. As leaves turned golden and nights grew cooler, we found our rhythm again, different from before. Deeper somehow, we'd weathered something profound together and emerged stronger. No regrets, I asked one evening, watching her paint the sunset. She set down her brush, turned to me with those green eyes that still made my heart skip. Only if we'd never met. She smiled, pulling me close for a kiss that tasted like promise, and paint and possibility. The email from my daughter arrived on a crisp October morning. Emma rarely wrote, preferring quick texts about her life in Chicago, but this was different, paragraphs of carefully chosen words about my lifestyle changes and her concerns. Mom, I'm worried about you. She wrote, this relationship seems impulsive. She's younger than I am. I stared at the screen until Audrey's arms wrapped around me from behind. Bad news. Emma's coming to visit, I said, closing the laptop. She wants to discuss things. Audrey's arms tightened slightly. Want me to disappear for a few days? Never. I turned to face her. You're part of my life now. They need to accept that Emma arrived the following week, her corporate polish. A stark contrast to our artsy home. Her eyes lingered on Audrey's paintings, now hanging prominently in the living room. They beautiful, she admitted reluctantly. Thank you. Audrey smiled, trying too hard. Would you like some tea? The afternoon was a masterclass in polite tension. Emma asked. Pointed questions about Audrey's career prospects and future plans. Each word carefully weighted so you were a surrogate. Emma said finally, for your friend. Yes. Audrey's hand found mine. It was a gift I could give. And now you're dating my mother. Emma. I warned, no, Mom. I need to understand you were married to Dad for 20 years, and now suddenly you're with a woman half your age. Love doesn't follow a schedule, Audrey said quietly, or rules about age. Emma's face softened slightly. You really care about her more than I thought possible. The ice began to thaw. Slowly, by dinner, Emma was asking genuine questions about Audrey's art, sharing stories about her own failed attempts at painting in college. But the real breakthrough came later when I found them in the kitchen at midnight, sharing leftover pie. She makes you happy, Emma said. When Audrey went to bed, I haven't seen you smile like that. Since maybe ever she does. I agreed. I'm still processing, she warned. But I'm trying. It was more than I'd hoped for. The next challenge came from Audrey's side. Her parents, conservative people from rural Indiana, had been avoiding the subject of our relationship entirely until they couldn't. They're selling the farm, Audrey explained. Phone clutched tight, they want to visit before they move. I spent days preparing, cleaning, cooking, trying to make our home look as conventional as possible. But you can't hide love in the details. My reading glasses next to her sketchbooks. Our intermingled clothes in the laundry, the way we moved around each other in the kitchen like a choreographed dance. Robert and Martha Coleman arrived on a Sunday, their disapproval evident in every careful glance. Your art is interesting, Martha offered, studying. A portrait of two women dancing in rain. Thanks, Mom. Audrey's voice was small. Robert barely spoke through dinner, but his silence spoke volumes when he finally did speak. His words cut deep. We raised Ed. You better than this. Better than what Audrey's. Voice shook, better than being honest. Than finding love you're living in. Sin. Martha whispered, with a woman old enough to be your mother. I reached for Audrey's hand under the table. Felt her trembling. I love her. Audrey said simply, if you can't accept that, then maybe you should leave. They did without finishing dessert. Audrey cried in my arms that night, but her tears felt different from before, cleansing rather than devastating. We're your family now. I promised you me Emma. When she's ready, Sarah. Marcus. The people who choose to understand the following weeks brought unexpected allies, my son Michael, called having heard from Emma. As long as you're happy, Mom, he said. That's all that matters. Sarah organized a dinner party inviting our closest friends. Marcus brought his husband. Emma sent a care package of Chicago's finest chocolates. Family isn't always blood, Dr. Martinez reminded us in therapy. Sometimes it's who stays. When others walk away one evening, sorting through old photos, I found a picture from my wedding day. I looked happy enough, but there was something missing in my eyes. A spark that I now saw every time I looked in. The mirror penny for your thoughts, Audrey asked, finding me staring at the photo just thinking about paths not taken. I said, and the ones that lead us exactly where we need to be. She took the photo, studied it. She looks like someone waiting for her life to begin. It did. I pulled her close, just not the way I expected that night. We added to our growing wall of family photos. Emma laughing with Audrey over pie, Sarah and Maris at the gallery opening our garden in full bloom, a tapestry of chosen family of love that defied expectations, no regrets. Audrey asked, echoing our familiar question. Not one I answered, meaning it more than ever. Planning a surprise for an artist who notices every detail isn't easy, but somehow I managed to keep Audrey away from the Morrison Gallery for 3 weeks, while Marcus and I transformed the space. Another late showing, she asked suspiciously one evening, as I rushed out, "You know how clients are." I kissed her quickly. Don't wait up, in truth. I was hanging. Her paintings not just recent works, but pieces that told our story. The abstract piece we'd first bonded over the Rain Dance series from that summer night. The raw, emotional paintings from her surrogacy journey. It's perfect, Marcus declared, adjusting. The lighting she'll cry, that's the plan. The ring burned a hole in my pocket, hidden in an antique paint palette I'd found at an estate sale. Not traditional. But then again, nothing about us was the morning of the exhibition. I woke early to find Audrey, already dressed. Sarah called. She explained emergency coffee meeting. I smiled, knowing Sarah's role in the plan. She'd keep Audrey busy until evening. While the final preparations were made, the gallery filled quickly that night. Emma flew in from Chicago. Michael drove down from Michigan. Even Catherine and Marie came, their daughter sleeping peacefully in a carrier. She's going to love it. Catherine squeezed my arm. Time and shared experiences had transformed her from perceived rival to genuine friend. When Sarah finally brought Audrey to the gallery, the crowd hushed. I watched from behind a partition as she froze in the doorway, taking in the exhibition title. The Colors of Us, a Love Story in Paint. What she breathed. Stepping inside, the gallery was arranged chronologically from our first meeting to recent works, each piece accompanied by a small card describing its significance in our journey. I emerged as she reached the painting of us dancing in the rain. "Surprise," I said softly. "You did all this." Her eyes were already wet with help. I took her hand, leading her through the gallery. "I wanted everyone to see our story, through your art, through your eyes." We stopped at each piece, the empty nursery that became her studio, the portrait of me in the garden, moments of joy and pain and healing captured in color and light. "There's one more piece," I said, leading her to a covered canvas. She pulled away the cloth to reveal a blank canvas, pristine, white against the wall. "I don't understand." She turned to me. "This is our future," I explained, reaching for the paint palette in my pocket. "Whatever we choose to make of it." The ring caught the gallery lights as I opened the palette, a vintage sapphire that matched her favorite shade of blue. "Audrey Coleman." My voice shook slightly. "Will you paint the rest of our story? With me?" The gallery fell silent. Even the baby seemed to hold her breath. Audrey stared at the ring, then at me, then at the blank canvas. A tear slid down her cheek. "Yes," she whispered then, louder. "Yes." The gallery erupted in applause as I slipped the ring onto her finger. Emma was crying openly now while Michael whistled. Sarah and Marcus hugged each other, their plan perfectly executed. "I can't believe you did all this," Audrey said later as we moved through the crowd. Accepting congratulations, the gallery was Marcus's idea. I admitted he said our story deserved an audience, and the blank canvas that was mine because the best part of our story hasn't been painted. Yet she kissed me then in front of everyone. Not caring who saw or what they thought, the exhibition became the talk of the local art scene. A love story told in paint critics called it a celebration of unconventional beauty later that night. After, the crowds had gone and the champagne was finished. We stood alone in the gallery. Which is your favorite? I asked, watching her study the pieces. She pointed to the portrait of me in the garden. This one. Because it's when I knew what that I wanted. To spend my life making you look at yourself the way I see you. I pulled her close. Breathing in her familiar scent of lavender and paint. We should keep the blank canvas, she murmured against my neck. Why is that? Because we just getting started outside. The first snow of winter began to fall, dusting the gallery windows with white inside surrounded by the colors of our love story. We held each other and dreamed of canvases yet to be filled, spring-painted Indianapolis and pastels when we decided to transform the Victorian house. The renovation started in the attic, a space flooded with natural light that would become our shared studio. Are you sure about this? Audrey asked. Watching workers install skylights, it's a lot of changes. I pulled, her close feeling the sapphire ring press. Against my back like us, the house had seen us through everything from tentative landlord and tenant, to lovers, to fiancé. Now it would witness our next chapter. Emma flew in to help her initial reservations. Long forgotten, she and Audrey spent weekends, hunting vintage furniture, bonding over a shared love of antiques. You know, Emma said one evening, watching Audrey store an old easel, I always wanted a cool younger mom. The wedding plans were simple, just family and close friends in our garden. Sarah appointed herself unofficial planner, while Marcus insisted on handling the aesthetics, nothing too traditional. I warned him. Trust me. He winked. I know my audience. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and warm. Cherry blossoms from our neighbors, tree drifted into our garden. Nature's confetti. I found Audrey in her studio already dressed in her cream silk suit, adding final touches to a painting. Bad luck to see the bride she teased not turning around. I'll risk it. I wrapped my arms around her waist. What are you working on? She stepped back, revealing a portrait of us in the garden. Not as we were, but as we would be in a few hours. Two women of different ages, bound by love, surrounded by flowers and art and possibility. It's perfect, I whispered. The ceremony was everything we hadn't known, we wanted. Emma walked me down the aisle while Michael escorted Audrey. Sarah cried through her Ma of Honor speech. Marcus and his husband performed a duet. Even Catherine and Marie came there, daughter toddling down the aisle as flower girl. You look happy. Catherine hugged Audrey after the ceremony, both of you. Our first dance was in the garden where we'd first said, I love you, fairy lights twinkling above us like stars. Remember that. Rainy night. Audrey murmured against my shoulder. How could I forget you made me dance in a thunderstorm? Best decision ever. The party continued into evening, our chosen family celebrating around us. Emma dancing with Audrey's college friends. Michael, deep in conversation with Marcus about art history. Sarah and Catherine swapping embarrassing stories about both brides as night fell. Our guests drifted away, leaving us alone in our transformed home. The attic studio glowed with moonlight through. The new skylights want to christen the studio. Audrey asked, eyes sparkling. We ended up painting instead, still in our wedding clothes, creating abstract expressions of joy on a shared canvas. This is going above our bed, Audrey declared, studying our collaborative work. What should we call it? She thought for a moment. Beginning later, curled together in sheets that smelled of paint and perfume. Audrey traced the lines of my face. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For taking a chance on your tenant, for loving me through everything. for dancing in the rain. I kissed her softly. Thank you for making me brave enough to start over the moon. Cast patterns through the skylights painting us. In silver light somewhere in the garden, wind chimes played. A gentle melody. We should get a dog, Audrey said. Suddenly I laughed already. Planning changes, always. She popped herself up on an elbow. That's what artists do. We keep creating, keep evolving. Then let him get a dog. I agreed, and maybe plant more roses, and definitely build that greenhouse you've been sketching, and fill it with all the colors we can find outside the cherry blossoms continued their gentle descent, covering our garden in white petals, inside two women of different ages, but perfectly matched souls held each other, planning their next masterpiece. Life we'd learned was like art, messy and unexpected and beautiful. What mattered wasn't the number of years between us or what others thought. What mattered was the love we chose to create day by day, brush stroke by brush stroke, until the canvas of our lives became something extraordinary. No regrets. I asked one final time. Audrey's answer was a kiss that tasted like forever. Not one, never one, back to top.